Hey there, everyone, and welcome and thank you for joining me today. I've got a little bit of a different video for you today, and over the next, series of videos I'll be doing on this channel, I'll also be featuring some special guests. And the reason I've got some fellow astrologers on board with me is that all of these fabulous astrologers contributed to the 2022 edition of Australia's WellBeing Astrology Guide. So we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But firstly, I'd love to welcome you to my first guest, SJ Anderson. So welcome, SJ. Thanks so much for joining me and for contributing to this publication.
I'm really glad to be here. Thank you, Cass. It's an honor to be here, to be talking with you, and very grateful that I got to contribute. So thank you.
I'm just so glad you said yes. I had sort of been watching your work online for a little while, and I'm thinking, I think I could probably snag you for an article on some of the mundane features of 2022. But before we get into that, I would just like to share with the subscribers of this channel more about you and who you are and what you do in our wonderful field of astrology.
Yeah, I mean, I'm an astrologer. I'm a through and through. I'm a consulting astrologer. I see clients all the time. I write and publish about astrology. It's kind of an interesting question. How do you encapsulate? We have the world of astrology, but then there's these subfields. And I would just say consulting is and publishing on social media is probably the two kind of core the features of the work that I do. I also do have some articles that I will publish periodically, and I have a YouTube channel where I give weekly updates. I guess that's part of the social media side, but I love clients. I love working with people. And that's kind of my current status, I guess. Do you want me to talk a little bit about the background, or?
Yes, tell us everything. Okay. How did you get into astrology to start with?
What's your story? Great. Yeah, my story is a little different. It's so cool seeing the younger generation where these people are in high school or college, early 20s, and they get the astrology bug has bitten them at that young age. And we have colleagues that are a little older that's the story too. But I feel like there's some other ones like me. It was Saturn return hit 29, 30, 31. And I'd always been a spiritual person before that and had a lot of explorations. I was studying Theravada Buddhism, a lot of silent retreats, a lot of yoga. But that's when the Saturn return brought me into, I guess, more divination practice or this type of occult work.
Yeah.
And I studied tarot for a long time. I went down that rabbit hole deeply. And then I met Jen Zart, Dr. Jen Zart. Incidentally, there was a mutual friend group. We all met in Boise, Idaho in 2016, not astrology related, and that she was there. And we just talked maybe one or two kind of passing conversations, and she turned something on in me that just has never gone off. And from that conversation forward, what she clued me into, there was a few things, but the big one was the Jupiter 12-year cycle. And I had just gone through some stuff. I was like, wait, what? 12-year cycle? I'm just like processing this for things that happened in an exact 12-year cycle. And once that, and then the tarot symbolism is heavily embedded in the astrological symbolism. But once she triggered that, it's been just nonstop, full power, full speed ahead, all my free time. And then I became a professional astrologer, in the few years after that. And now that's my life. It's my life.
I love it. I love it. And what I think maybe I first found you a handful of years ago on Twitter. And that's generally not my preferred platform. But every now and then there will be somebody that I'm like, oh, like that, or I read this. And there was a few things that I've really noticed with your work is that you're so good at working with the cycles. You're like, this is something that's happening in the sky now. The last time that happened was this time and this time and this time, being able to link that. And then as the editor of this publication, I had a little bit of a sneaky, I had a strategy, and I was really excited that you were also born on the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in Libra. Seen on your website, yes, he's a Pluto and Libra baby, and I'm going to make sure he says yes to this project. And so I'm just wondering, being born on that first air conjunction, has that been a part of your story, sort of, being born into that cycle? Does that sort of maybe awaken you a little bit more to these kind of more mundane cycles that Jupiter and Saturn's really connected to?
Yeah, that's a great question. Boy, I hadn't even thought about the importance of that conjunction in our mundane astrological world, and how that being in my natal chart might have keyed me more into a mundane astrological practice. I would say yes, for sure. For me individually, I think generationally, the big thing about this generation is that we are. So, my read is that conjunction 1980, it's a process. It becomes and then a 40-year process of this transition that completed in 2020. So everybody that has been involved in this transition, we are like the internet video game generation. I mean, I grew up with the Nintendos. I had America Online, the early internet, like other people that were alive at that time too. But I think there's something about the maturation cycle from like age 0 to age 10. You get that phase of it, age 10 to age 20. Those are key formative years. And those are years where this digitized reality comes in more fully, but it's kind of a hybrid. They call us the well, I won't go into that. It's the generation divisions. There's a name for my generation. It's called the Oregon Trail generation, because it's a video game we played in school to teach us computer skills. It's kind of after Gen X, before Gen, is it Y or no, Gen
I think I'm technically X. I've just got only a couple of years on you. A few. But yeah, no, definitely still in the Pluto in Libra category. But one thing I have observed is, and even people who are not inside the astrology community or industry and probably would actually be skeptics, but people that I've been following in other industries and personal interests that I have, how many people are turning 40 this year, and they've really been early adopters of technology, of social media, and that sort of development of maybe, like, say for instance, you have a background in powerlifting and what have you. So people who are in the sort of online, the personal training or coaching space, getting out of the gym and moving online, and just seeing some of the people who have just been able to embrace that technology and just go wild with it has really been incredible to watch. And I really want to say there's a cycle for that. But yeah, of course, not everybody wants to know. So it's really fascinating to see all of that happening. So yeah, so are you going to say something?
Just quickly. Yeah, sure, that's kind of my story too, because I've been telling people, if you have that conjunction natally, when these transiting planets return to a co-presence, there's going to be some activation in that nativity. But yeah, for me, I mean, everything went online around this co-presence as it's emerged. My whole life became heavily online, and I entered, fully to the personal coaching field, but the subset of that is the astrological or the diviner. Yeah. So I'm part of this movement that you've identified. So
yeah. So no, I've really seen it, and even people in astrology and as I said, a whole variety of communities might have just sort of been simmering, doing their thing, and then boom, the conjunction happened in December, and all of a sudden their followers crazy, their profiles crazy, and it's like, it's the air time. And so you guys are the first seeds of this cycle have blossomed now. So I can't help but talk the astrology, of course, but I don't know whether you're a day chart or a night chart, but if you use the Fadaria cycles, you're also moving, if you're born at night, you're also moving into that solar phase. So it really is turning on that spotlight for the first time in your life. But then if you're born in day, it will turn on that Saturn cycle. So of course that will also feed into the conjunction as well. So it's really interesting to observe all of these things. So speaking of cycles and history and all of that stuff, which I personally love reading your work on this sort of thing. So in the astrology WellBeing Astrology Guide. So I'll just put a little picture of the cover for our audience to see. You wrote an article about the Uranus and North Node conjunction of 2022. So did you want to share a little bit about that with us?
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks. I was going to say, for mentioning my cycle work earlier, I was just going to say one thing, my favorite genre of tweet. This is one of my favorite genre of tweets. It starts with "the last time," And it's a whole genre where you just say the last time this happened, then you can provide the facts about when that happened before.
And that's the beautiful thing about what we do. Like there's this art form of interpretation and weaving the threads together. But then there's also this technical component where our times are cyclic. So of course, you know, similar themes are going to happen when similar planetary activations occur. So, and this is what I also really loved with what you brought up, particularly with Alexander the Great and those cycles that are overlaying now. So tell us more about it.
Okay, perfect. So I just going to say, you asked me about, okay, what about Uranus North Node? And I looked at the list that you sent of maybe some of the ideas that you were still ripe for writing about. And I was like, I'll just pick that one. I didn't even think too quickly about it. I just was like, and I hadn't even looked at the astrology. This was months and months ago. So once I get into it and I punch it up, I saw very quickly Mars is right with Uranus and the North Node. And so I've been thinking about it as this triple conjunction moment.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Because Mars is role. And I think, so just to say for people out there, we get a martial flavor with this conjunction. But yeah, just to scroll back, I mean, my ideas about how to analyze when you have a co-presence, I used that term earlier and I'll use it again, is just, it's this division of 12 of the ecliptic into the zodiac, planets meeting in the same sign. That's kind of the highest level by which, or one of the higher levels by which we can organize these repetitions of cycles. You just type into your software, when was this planet, and this planet in that sign before? And so I did some of that work in the article. And I can just say here briefly, I won't go into everything, but, you know, Uranus was in Taurus in the 1930s, and the meat of that decade, we know how tumultuous that was. The North Node was last in Taurus in 2003, 2004. When Facebook was founded, that was quite revelatory for our, you know, relationships. Of course, Venus rules Taurus. One higher level point I'll just say is that I always like to start with, what does the planet signify? What is the sign? What's the ruler of the sign? What planet is that? And what does that signify? And just get those planetary significations at the outset established, because that's what we're painting with.
Yes.
And so I could just say here in the article, I quote some other astrologers that I like, but Uranus, unexpected things, shocking revelations that might be epiphanies or breakthroughs. You know, Venus is the touch, the tangible, the physical, the pleasure. Mars is the separating out or breaking out from things, sort of like Uranus, maybe in the traditional system. I think Mars is maybe the most Uranian. I made a little case for that in the article. And then the North Node, I was quoting astrologer Kamala Sutton, one of our contemporary Vedic astrologers, but she talks about it being this kind of insatiable appetite, or this appetite for more that can be kind of problematic. So we're mixing all of these energies. And 1930s, we have a complete change in the economic landscape of the globe that impacted the ability to have pleasure for a lot of people. You know, if you're hunting for work, or you lost your home, or you're poor, it's a very shock. I think it was a shock.
Yeah, it really brings, you know, Uranus and Taurus naturally will bring one thing, because, you know, when we have these really big planet cycles coming up, you know, as astrologers, we have to think, how are we going to explain this to people? Because they're going to ask, right? And I remember thinking, getting comfortable with discomfort or disrupted comfort, because Taurus is one of those signs. As the owner of a couple of planets in Taurus, there's some things we just do not like change around. And so Uranus comes along, and, you know, it's like and plus with Mars, it's literally like bringing this hot branding iron to the, you know, cow or the bull that's just, you know, happy in the fields, sunshine and grass, not a care in the world. And then boom, you know, everything is kind of shocked and you know, that stability. And we're, you know, of course, we don't really need to explain how we're already experiencing that. And it's, you know, we'll get a bit of a sneak preview, I suppose, with next month's lunar eclipse for sure, but more to come as far as that sort of discomfort comes as, you know, the time rolls around. So yeah, there is those sort of like three planetary combinations that are coming through with this cycle.
Yeah. So the 1930s Uranus and Taurus is the one. I love that analogy. Branding. I think I'll use that one. That's cool. I'm kind of like, part of me is excited. I want to get a little bit of branding myself, the kind of pleasure pain principle there. But
Get a tattoo or
so there's
something.
a tattoo. Yeah, I've got plenty, but I mean, maybe I'll get a fresh one for this one. But so that's an interesting one. But Uranus in the in Taurus in the early aughts, early to mid aughts, is very interesting as well, because it's really when social media begins. And we think about how since that inception, like with Facebook and MySpace, and I have it in the article, the exact facts of what started when, but it changed everything about how we relate to people. And that's another side of the significations of Venus, is just our relating. And everything is now online, and it's your profile and your friends. And so I think there's another dose of that coming. I mean, we just talked about our generation shifting online with our careers. I think we might see other transformations or unexpected things or faded eclipse things around how our digital lives are going to continue into this century. Yeah. So there's that component. And then what's the other one? Mars and Taurus. It's happened so often, I didn't really explore that because it's not as longer term.
Yeah.
But I did explore when all three come together, and I'll save that here for the next phase of this. What do you think about the North Node in Taurus? Have you looked at that at all, or?
Yeah, I have. Yeah, the North Node in Taurus. I think this is, if we think about Rahu or the North Node, we think about it as, speaking of kids of this air generation, I've often described Rahu as like a Pac-Man. It just sort of eats things, you know what I mean? It's this like little round face with the mouth, it just eats things. So it's insatiable and it's ambitious, and it will do what it takes to get its needs met, right? So, and then in Taurus, we are thinking about those kind of, our basic survival resources, like these fundamental things, food and shelter and relationships, the Venus component as well. And it's, what you were saying there before, SJ, kind of, we were talking about the North Node last in Taurus was 2003, 2004, and we sort of kind of moved into this new style of relationship. Today at the gym, I was talking to somebody and, about, just the state of the world, because I guess that's, we don't talk about the weather really much anymore. No. And I said, this is the funny thing, right? When we talk about, getting off topic here, but if we're, talking about, various sort of digital surveillance or control and all of these sorts of different things that are sort of being introduced in different areas of the world. But this again is the Taurus component. We could, do we really need our smartphones? Like, really? We could just do without them and this all stops. Go back to just logging in on our laptops or our hard drives or, the desktop things, like having this mobile computer around. This is sort of the new level of resistance in a sense, because we moved into, I don't want to have a mobile phone. And I remember there was plenty of people that just did not want to have, what we call them mobiles, so cell phones. So yeah, people didn't want to go into that space, but now we'd be challenged to do without it. So, and that's the innovative component that's, really kind of coming through with Uranus and Taurus and the North Node together right now. So yeah, I mean, I really do hope in some respects, like it was Lynn Bell that made in an article that she wrote for WellBeing a couple of years back, was mentioning that Uranus and Taurus can often be a time where women's issues or liberation of women can be a sort of a signature theme. So I do suspect that we'll see some stuff around that. And even the most like literal level, I mean, like Uranus and Taurus has just kind of been sitting there, it's had its activations with Saturn and, it's sort of our minor planet or, the faster moving planets triggering it. But, for the last, 3-ish years, it really hasn't had any like massive boom happen to it. So once that North Node moves in there early January, this Uranus North Node energy is just going to explode. And already we're sort of seeing how, I'm seeing at least talk of how innovation around meat and meat products in particular coming through. So I think that's going to, again, our disrupted comfort, having to maybe modify or change some of those real basal level survival things, and that's the food that we consume. So even the disruptions to the logistics and the supply chains and all the things. So just that basic underlining thing of disrupted comfort is, for anybody who has those fixed signatures in their birth chart, it's definitely going to be amplified once that node shifts, for sure.
Wonderful. Yeah. And amazing. Yeah. Disrupted comfort. I love that phrase. I think it's a nice keyword for everything that we're describing and experiencing on a collective level. Very, very apropos. I can throw in here. So I just want to mention, so there's this part of the cycle. This is just the first setup, because the big meat of the examination is then adding in degrees. And so I love the co-presence and the sign transits of planets. It's extremely important. But if we refine it even more, we go to the degree. When was the last time, let's say, Uranus conjoined the North Node in this degree? This will be it's Uranus 19 or 18 degrees.
Yeah.
And this happened. This was really fascinating to me. It happened.
Fascinating.
Yeah. He publishes, Isaac Newton publishes the text here, Principia. Let me get it exactly up. His Principia Mathematica, I think, is the name of the text. And this was a text that revolutionized the way that we do mathematics, and that therefore build in the world. And so again, it's a North Node, Uranus kind of shock to Taurus here, where this book, again, it fuels everything. And you might say it's the antecedent. A lot of people do say it's the forerunner of the Industrial Revolution.
Yeah.
When we talk about Rahu being this craving and this insatiable desire to expand, this mathematical text emerges. I think it's within the month of when the conjunction perfects, 1687, weeks after. So it's weeks after. He publishes it, and then within the succeeding weeks, you get the conjunction that's perfecting.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a big analogy for what we're into now, with which we'll talk more about later. And I think you were right to bring up surveillance and just the tech and its omnipresence in our lives, because the fourth industrial revolution, what they call the fourth industrial revolution, is also a big part of this article, and how that is going to change and is poised to change everything that this century is, it's yet to become, in terms of people that are powerful and advocating for these shifts. I mean, the technology is coming. It's how do we use the technology? How do we retain our maybe best selves amidst this explosion of technology like nothing we've ever seen?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, one thing, when your article landed in my inbox, it was what I really loved was the story of cutting the Gordian knot. And I think this is such a pivotal story, especially for astrologers. So do you want to talk to us more about that? Obviously with the Hellenistic components, things like that.
Perfect. Yeah. So tracing the logic, I looked, when was Uranus and the North Node together in that degree? And then I went a step further, when we add in Mars now. And that's where it got really interesting for me, because when I wrote this, I was in Skopje. I was in Macedonia, where Philip of Macedon, where he was there, the king, and then has Alexander. There's a statue of Alexander right in the square of Skopje, the capital. I was living there when all these breakthroughs happened, so you can imagine how crazy this was for me. But basically, just to give the technical side, Mars, Uranus, and Rahu, they came within a degree of each other. That's what I was trying to find, because they're not all in that same degree ever in the searchable ephemeris.
Yeah.
But there's two candidates where they were that close. And the first was 156 BC, but they was in a different part of Taurus. It's earlier, I believe, in Taurus. But the last time they were in this same little sector was in
I think it's
324 BC. Yeah, 324 BC, and Mars and Rahu conjoined in Taurus 18, so the degree before, but and then Mars conjoined, Uranus conjoined both Mars and Rahu in Taurus 18, the degree before, but Mars conjoined Rahu in Taurus 19, the same one that we're experiencing this year.
Yeah.
So that's very, very close. And So then I just went, and this is how I do this work. I like to get the ephemerises up, see the dates, and then I start exploring what happened and start thinking about then this creative side of, well, what's the narrative here? What is the connection? And it became clear to me that we're experiencing, so Alexander the Great was on the march during this time. He was having battles in Afghanistan in this year, according to the history we have, 324 BC. And that's a massive, important thing for the modern world, because that Hellenistic world that he created, we've inherited the intellectual traditions from that world.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's what I loved so much about you connecting these data points, was that, even in the 20 years I've been practicing astrology, I've seen the rise of Hellenistic techniques and the popularity of it, and thinking that we have this Mars, Uranus, and North Node conjunction happening at this same degree when this is rising. Like, what could happen? Could there be a new discovery or a new unearthing of new texts, or, the next, I just want to know, like, how the terms and bounds were, like, the rationale behind it, and even some of the Fenarius cycles, right, that I, do the mental gymnastics trying to figure out. So, for me, I sort of see that there is that possibility or potential there that we might discover something.
Yeah, and that would be very exciting to have
Wouldn't
new
it?
information about that part of history. And
Yeah.
I think it's also, though, too, what we're going to discover that's new, even new outside of what we've experienced before. So the work of people like David Cochran and others that are doing, like, computers and programming and vibrational astrology and a whole new aspect systems. Like, I think this is also part of the moment of maybe a new kind of combination of things with the technology. This is one of the best parts of the fourth industrial revolution, in my view. This omnipresent interconnectivity is that I get to talk to you, for one, and people over the world, and it's like we're in the same room, but there's these kind of combinations of ideas that we've never seen before, including the computer processing systems that we have. And I do expect to have big breakthroughs. I think AI will play a role in helping us understand the patterns in the ephemeris, because the AIs can go in and make connections that we just haven't been able to make. I'm waiting for someone to write that program. I wish I had the skills, but I just simply don't have the coding skills. But I do think we'll have massive breakthroughs. One other thing just to say here about the Gordian knot. So the Gordian knot moment, it's said to have happened before this time, but I'm thinking as a metaphor for Alexander's mind state and what he was going through. It's perfect for Rahu, earth sign. It's an earth. It's the plants that you use to make a rope and then to tie. So that's a fixed earth sign. That's Taurus. It's the knot is fixed earth. And he just says, they say, whoever can untie it will rule the world. And he thinks about it for a second and just has a Uranian flash with the martial sword and just slashes it and says, there you go, I'm going to rule the world. So these kind of breakthroughs, I think, are baked into the cake, as it were. And we're going to have a big year for 2022. It's almost, to think it could be bigger than 2021 or 2020.
Agreed.
It's like we wouldn't even think that, but I think the astrology of 2022 in some ways is even more epic, I will say. It's definitely continuing what was already massively important, but we continue another year with some epic stuff, and this is one of the
and so not only have we got the Mars Uranus North Node component, but there's also the square to Saturn. So now we will have that sort of, the square that's been the signature of this year will then be amplified by this fated quality of the node. So it's almost this like directional shift, and this is the way we're going to be going for a period of time. So, it was just fascinating to read your article. And I mean, as somebody who has a Mars in Taurus, to hear that story of that not being cut, I just love a sword fight. So not that I know how to do it, but it's like nothing like, the old fashioned sword to settle an argument. Right. So, thank you. I just want to thank you for writing this magnificent piece. I'm so glad that you were able to do it. The magazine itself, I guess, one way that I could describe it is a little bit like Australia's TMA magazine, the Mountain Astrologer. So it's got comprehensive astrology horoscopes at the front, written by yours truly. We've also got some other fabulous writers, some astrologers I'm sure many of you already know and love. So there's Gray Crawford, there is Achuta Bava, Lisa Shime, Elodie, I'm not going to attempt to pronounce that French surname. I'll just ruin that. Giulio Pellegrini, Kate Petty, Alicia Youssef, so many wonderful writers. So what I'll do in the show notes below is that I will put some details on how to get a copy of that. If you're not in Australia, I'd probably recommend you get the digital copy. It'll take a little while to get it hard copy, and the publishers actually don't send internationally, but if you really do want a hard copy, I am sending them out. So I'll put a link where you can get in contact with me for that. So before we wind up, SJ, I just want to ask, have you got anything that you're wanting to promote or let the humans know what you're doing, where you're up to? Because you're living in Albania, correct, right now?
Yep. Yeah, I'm here in the great country of Albania.
Fantastic. So you're doing all your consultations and writing and your weekly YouTube videos. So SJ has a really great detailed analogies, outline of the weekly astrology. And what I really love, thinking of the analogies, what I really love about the videos that you do is that you really break the astrology down, but then you also give some really beautiful insights or analogies or tips or advice of how that astrology will feel through the day. And that's what I really like about that. It's one thing to, we love to talk about the technicalities of astrology, but people who are just maybe new to astrology or trying to wrap their head around how it works, just want to know what's in it for them. And that's a beautiful thing that you provide in your weekly videos.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
So do you have any webinars, courses, or any other articles or things that you're working on right now?
Yeah, so I don't have anything like as big as writing this article for any third parties, but I've kind of decided that 2022 for me, I'm kind of going inward a little bit, and I've got a bunch of stuff I'm working on, a big article right now on the Egyptian terms that I'm hoping to have published later this year. I've got a bunch of topics I want to do more writing on. So that's kind of where I'm turning my focus. All of it will be available on my Twitter feed. That's probably the best place to keep track of me, at SJAnderson144. And my YouTube channel, yes, I do these weekly forecasts, which I love. And I do release videos, sometimes topical videos. So I'll be releasing something that's accompanying that essay when it's published, hopefully by the end of 2022, by the end of 2021, maybe into 2022, it's looking like now. But so I'm just working on some stuff that's important to me. But basically my website, my Twitter, my YouTube, that's where you want to follow me, and it'll all be there. So
we can keep tabs on you. So I'll put all those social media links, your website, all that in the show notes below. So do follow SJ's channel. It's fabulous. I like to check it out myself. And I love all your little scenery, like your little, I don't know, what do you call it? Like a little intermission and all your little sceneries and things like that. It's like, oh, I'm not in Australia. I'm actually traveling. I love it. All right. Well, SJ, it's so great to connect and do this video with you. And congratulations on a fabulous article. I really, really enjoyed it. And I hope that everybody else who grabs a copy of the magazine will see how wonderful it was as well.
Thank you. Great to be with you again. And I enjoy the articles, everybody. Enjoy the magazine. It's going to be amazing. If you've ever picked up a magazine with a lot of astrology articles, you can keep it with you, and it's a real learning tool. So I get excited. Yeah.
They're great keepsakes. You'll always refer to them, down the track as well. All right. So great to connect with you. We'll have to do this again.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Take care, everybody.
Okay. Bye-bye.